picture that many people felt captured people power in action, a community standing firm. As you'll have seen, and as you can see there, hundreds of people confronted Home Office officials in the streets of Glasgow this week to protest the detention of two Indian men. It worked, for now. Those two men were later released into the community. But the UK government says the action was taken because the men had no legal right to remain here. It has, of course, reopened the debate over immigration and how it applies in Scotland. So, where next for that debate? Well, let's speak to the human rights lawyer Aamar Anwar, who brokered the deal to set those men free. Mr. Anwar, thanks very much indeed for being with us. We've had a bit of time, I guess, now to reflect on what happened on Thursday. What needs to happen now to prevent that from taking place again?
Well, I think, first of all, we need to see it for what it is. The immigration raid was deeply cynical, it was provocative, it was held on the day of Eid in the most diverse community in Scotland, the largest Muslim community, that the cowards from the Home Office initially refused to answer the phone to the First Minister of Scotland, to the Cabinet Secretary for Justice. When my discussions with the police, they were at the end of their tether because they had not been informed about this raid and then were called upon for their assistance. Glasgow and other cities time and time again have said that they want an end to drone raids, and it's pretty clear that the Scottish Government and political parties in Scotland, apart from the Conservative Party, are deeply unhappy with the Home Office conducting itself in this manner. So there needs to be, they need to respond. I mean, the fact that it was almost as though the Home Office, Priti Patel's Home Office, had lit a fuse from London and wanted the carnage to take place, without realising the impact it would have had in the community. As I said to the police on that afternoon on Thursday, they had two options. One was to release the men to their freedom, and the second one was unthinkable, because the idea of having to use force to disperse a local community who were chanting, "Let them go, these are our neighbours," was unthinkable. Yeah, and so they had to let them go, and it was because of people power.
That's the point in this, though, isn't it? That can't go on. So
absolutely, it'll go on until the UK government decides to change the way they operate. They operate a systemic, barbaric treatment of asylum seekers, of refugees. Yep. And I have to say this as well. When you said earlier on about these men, I think what your viewers should also know is that something like well over 3/4 of people's applications ultimately end up being accepted by the Home Office. And the other thing to say is, what exactly were they going to do with these men? Yep. We're in the middle of COVID. Where were they going to deport them to? Because India wasn't going to accept them.
Okay, but that aside, for now, let's just accept that this is an immigration system. There is a legal immigration system. It was imposed by a government who were elected on a manifesto that contained that immigration system, and it is the law up here. So if people have come to the end of that system and the system says they have to be removed, how do you suggest the law should be implemented?
Well, I absolutely believe that we should be having our own immigration system in Scotland. It may well be a reserved matter, but with the greatest respect, Martin, if you let me answer, what I'm saying is it could be implemented if people put their heads together. The fact that the Home Secretary couldn't even pick up the phone to our First Minister shows the disdain that she has for the people of Scotland. Yeah. I bet if this was happening in London, she would have picked up the phone to the Metropolitan Police or to the Lord Mayor. Sure. And I think the issue is this, that no human being is illegal. No human being is illegal. And this system needs to change. For many years, we have seen the scar on the map of Scotland, Dungavel Immigration Removal Centre. And people have had enough, and they want this to change. And the majority of people in Scotland didn't vote for this Westminster government.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, listen, Mr. Anwar,
we did come together.
Lots of recent surveys have shown actually the attitude towards immigration in Scotland is not that different to the attitude in England and Wales. But if you say Scotland should have its own immigration system, presumably there has to be a way of enforcing that for people whose applications are denied. And what should that be? Because these are two people who had come to the end of the line. This wasn't the first move that the Home Office had made against these two people. This was the end of the line, the last resort. How should that work up here?
Well, Martin, it wasn't the end of the line because you haven't seen their legal papers, you haven't seen their process. Time and time again, immigration carry out such raids, and ultimately what happens is individuals after several days are released into the public domain. Released from Dungavel. So that's the first thing I would say. That's a caveat. With regards to what legislation, how it should be amended, that's not for me. I'm not a politician. I'm a lawyer, a campaigner, and I ultimately believe that no human being is illegal. So we need to change the way we treat people who are seeking safety from persecution, from poverty, from war. We look at what's happening in Gaza today. I mean, and what you can imagine is what Priti Patel would say, that any Palestinians who choose to flee to safety should not be allowed to.
But each case is taken on its own merits, presumably, right? And you were saying that most of the applications pass.
Merits, time, and well, that's because lawyers have to then fight, local community have to fight, people come together in solidarity with these individuals, because as far as the Home Office would have it, they time and time again break the law. If there's anyone breaking the law, it's Priti Patel. It's a Home Office. They're immigration enforcement people. We saw it with Windrush. We see it with the illegal deportations of asylum seekers, often to their death, to persecution or jail sentences. And that system should be ripped up and it should be started again.
Do you have concerns that this is going to become a bit of a kind of political battleground, this? Because it is fertile territory for a row between Westminster and Holyrood, isn't it?
Well, what I have great admiration for, or what happened on Thursday, was that we saw politicians from all sides. We saw the SNP, we saw the Labour Party, we saw newly elected people like Paul Sweeney at the demonstration. We saw Alison Phillips from the SNP, a local MSP, and other individuals all came together, united as one, saying this should not be allowed to happen in Scotland. It's a disgrace. It's barbarism in practice. So yes, it will become a political hot potato. It will lead to debate. But what I'll say is this: politicians can carry on doing what they need to do. They can pick up the phone, they can argue away. But the people of Glasgow set the benchmark high and showed exactly what's possible. We saw it once before with the Glasgow girls in the dawn raids that stopped dawn raids taking place in Scotland. And those Glasgow girls were standing as Glasgow women on that march, on that demonstration on Thursday. Yeah. And people are saying this will not happen.
Okay,
These are our neighbours.
Let me ask you this one last, perhaps slightly thorny question. I asked it to Jason Leach earlier on. Did you have any concerns over the gathering of that crowd, given it was in the very streets where this really concerning new outbreak of coronavirus is happening?
Well, absolutely. Of course I had concerns, you know. And the first thing I would say is, well, then there was no need for the police to swamp the area with 40 riot vans, hundreds of police officers tooled up, ready to go in to disperse a crowd. What did they think they would have done? Because we saw a hands-off approach, and there'll be questions that many people will be asking this morning. I mean, Home Secretary referred to the crowd. That was her response, was to refer to them. The Home Office was to refer to the people of Kenmure Street, Shields, as the mob. They're not the mob. That's the community. That's peace-loving, diverse community that lives there. So, of course, there was real concerns, but people were wanting to protect the lives of these individuals, and that's why they came out.
All right.
And eventually the police had to leave.
Lots of different opinions, lots of strong opinions on all of this over the course of the last few days, and presumably that's not the last we've heard about. Aamar Anwar, listen, many thanks indeed for your time this morning.
Michael.
Good to see you. Right, that is